Hey, what's up, Real Progressives? It's Rocco Million, about 10 o'clock at night, Friday. It's my new scheduled broadcast every week. I'll be coming at you live at 10 p.m. every Friday on Real Progressives to talk about the issues of the week through the lens of economic truth, MMT. Today, last few days, I haven't really been feeling good at all. Been actually last few months, been dealing with a lot of health issues. I'm a disabled veteran. I've had multiple spinal surgeries, got all these problems, and I can't even get the health care I need. They disenrolled me from the VA medical system because they said I didn't see a doctor for a year, and it's because it's real hard for me to get there. It's a whole city away, and the last appointment I made, they told me out of the blue they had a shuttle service I never knew that they even had, and they were supposed to come pick me up, and they never even came and picked me up. And so they disenrolled me and told me it was to make room for veterans who wanted care. Well, I want care, really. I should, I'm a whole city away. I should be able to, go to a doctor I want that's close to me. I don't have a car. I'm poor. I live at I barely survive. This is ridiculous. And so, it made me to start thinking, how hard it is to live at the bottom, and how a lot of people in America don't really know that, and they don't understand that, or they don't want to think about it. Talking to my mom today, and she was saying, "Oh, I'm so sick of hearing about this stuff. There's nothing we can do. We're powerless. It makes me sick to my stomach to think about this." And I tried to tell her, well, we're supposed to be sick to our stomach. All right, when the Jews are being led to the ovens, right? You don't want people to be not thinking about it. That's how atrocities happen. All right, everybody should be upset. Everybody needs to be, you know, uh, sick to their stomach. They need to be outraged. All right, our government inflicts economic terror. It inflicts police terror, pointless austerity that kills, just like bullets. All right, millions of people are suffering and dying for no other reason than a lack of cash. That's what I mean by you know, um, you know, the Jews being led to the ovens. It's the same thing. And if we were in Nazi Germany, I told my mom, would you tell your son who is telling you, we got to do something? They're killing Jews outside. We got to do something. And I said, would you have told your son, just forget about it? Think about happier things. We don't want to be, that makes me sick to my stomach to think about what's going on. And that's why it happens. That when you feel sick to your stomach like that, that's called cognitive dissonance. You actually will feel sick, physically ill. You know, when you don't want to when you don't want to see something, it's a denial mechanism. It's like a protection mechanism for your brain, and so we have to understand that, and we have to overcome it. Um, and that's why I'm reminded of our mission at Real Progressives. This is why we do what we do. Real Progressives is a grassroots movement. Steve Grumbine, founded and got us all somehow to come together, and he organized this thing, and it's growing. It's taken off now, and we all see the benefits of it. Because we focus on solutions and we stay out of the petty, conspiracies and petty nonsense that leads us astray. We focus on, the big picture, and that allows us to, focus on solutions instead of, going down the rabbit hole for the hell of it. And so if you can, please help us, because change will only come bottom up. Middle's fine. Change is only going to come from you and me. So if you don't got money, please volunteer with Real Progressives. We need editors, we need writers, we need people to do live streams, we need all kind of project managers. We need all this stuff. So please, all you got to do is go to the page and follow it and sign up. If you don't got time to do that and you got some money, then go there and donate. Because we need that, that money for the organization. There's a ton more things we want to do. We want to have outreach into the community to affect real economic and social justice, because, true freedom, you can't have true freedom without economic justice. That's the whole thing. All problems in our society are rooted in economics, and they have their macroeconomic solutions. So that's the whole point. Now, I'm going to be having a kind of a format change. You know what I mean? I'm going to start each video by giving an overview of our operational reality, MMT, just to get everybody on the same page, because even today I was explaining this stuff, and I take for granted that people know what I'm talking about. This kid said, wait a minute, what is the private sector? What does that mean? And I thought about that, and I said, man, I need to work on trying to, communicate in better context. So when I say private sector, if I'm going to say something, first of all, when I say private sector, what I mean is everybody in our domestic economy that's not the government. And so when I say it in the future, I'm going to try to say, government imposes tax on us in the private sector. And that way the context will kind of help people understand what I'm actually talking about. And so I'm going to go over this and just to kind of get us all on the same page. And then I'll talk about the issues of the prior week through the lens of that operational reality, to start talking about this, I always like to, start talking about our socially owned government and what that means. And basically, we are guaranteed government for, of, and by the people. All right, for the general welfare of society. That is public. That's socially owned government for the public purpose. All right, for the general welfare of society. That's a operational fact, a constitutional fact. Okay, the preamble to the Constitution mandates that our government promote the general welfare of society. It mandates that our government promote domestic tranquility. It mandates, our government take care of society. That's an operational fact. You can't argue with that. So with that, that's the big picture. Our government was formed to, oversee the general welfare, which is the overall health of our economy and society. And that's the only job of government. That's what it needs to regulate and spend dollars and organize real resources and do all these things. That's government's job. So government Article 1, Section 8 mandates that Congress mint and tax to provide for the general welfare of society. So what that actually means is government never needs money. All right. The government makes all dollars by congressional decree, which is just a law from thin air for the general welfare of society. So government never needs money. That's always infinite for the federal government. Okay, we all have to understand that. What government needs is real resources. Okay, things like infrastructure, roads, and stuff like that. Things like sanitation systems, legal systems, military. We need to defend ourselves. This is government's job. This is the public purpose. All right. And so like healthcare, for instance, we need top-notch healthcare for all because sick, miserable society can't produce all of our needs of tomorrow. So healthcare is an essential public good in and of itself. That's the government's job. And, to privatize things and to put profit over the general welfare of society, over government's mandate to the general welfare, that's always fascism. That's always wrong. Our socially owned government is supposed to work for the public purpose and let the individual make what they can from the balanced economy that creates. Our socially owned government is never supposed to work for the individual and for society to make do with the scraps. That's fascism. That's no good. Government suppresses labor, and that's what happens right now. Government suppresses labor, the majority, and empowers corporations, the 1%. That's fascism. The government's job is to get those real resources that it needs to satisfy its mandate to the general welfare. So how does government get military? How does government get people to sign up for the military? How does government get people to build roads for the community? How does government get people to join the police force, to be judges, to be jailers, to do all the things that, is needed to maintain a modern society? How does government get people to do all that stuff? All right, we don't take slaves anymore. We use a monetary economy, debt instruments, money. Government uses money. It is a social construct. Taxation and spending is a social construct. It's a means of production designed to drive real resources from us in the private sector to the public sector for the public purpose, for the general welfare of society. All right, so that's how government gets the real resources it needs. Government imposes tax on us in the private sector, making us instantly unemployed. All right, if people put a tax on my land, I gotta become unemployed. I gotta be willing to sell my goods and labor for dollars to survive and pay my tax, stay free, and keep my stuff. So now government has a way to get me to go to the military. Now government has a way to get me to build some roads. All right, I have to figure out how to get these dollars. I have to sell my goods or labor to get these dollars. Now government can provision the general welfare of society with real resources using paid employment. So government taxation creates unemployment so that government can provision society with the real resources it needs using paid employment. This is how we get military. This is how we get roads, healthcare, education, sanitation systems, you name it, infrastructure. It's just a means of production. And so, if government creates unemployment for the general welfare of society, then it's government's responsibility to maintain true full employment for that same general welfare of society. It's just simple logic. Because government, you got to think about this. Government taxation creates all unemployment. It creates unemployment ultimately. All right. And only government spending satisfies that condition with paid employment. So it would be sadistic for the government to make unemployment and force them and keep them unemployed and not spend the dollars required into existence that are required to make them to hire them and give them paid employment, to maximize their productive value. We have, especially when you look, and we have work all over America. Our communities all across America are crumbling. We have all types of work that needs done. People are being poisoned from drinking water in Flint. This is work the private sector does not want to do. And we have millions of people all over the place that are unemployed. All right. And millions more because of that are underemployed. These are people the private sector doesn't want or doesn't care about. All right. So this is the job of government in the first place, to make money by a law, by congressional decree from thin air to, organize and utilize the real resources of our nation for the general welfare. So government pays people to do work and provision our society, to rebuild our crumbling society. That's the whole point. And there's nothing radical about that. It's actually the opposite. It's radical to do the opposite. When you have people, millions of people that want to do, work, and you have tons of work that needs done, and you have a government that has an infinite amount of dollars, It's radical to say we're not going to maximize that productive capacity. Instead, we're going to actually target unemployment, and we're going to intentionally keep massive scale poverty, systemic poverty throughout America. That's what's radical. That also keeps that targeting unemployment also keeps a buffer stock of unemployment for capital to wage war on labor with. All right. It's all about the profits of the 1%. And this is how they get those profits. When government keeps a buffer stock of unemployed for capital, now capital has a weapon to wage war against labor with. This puts downward pressure on all labor wages and working conditions. All right. Now the boss don't have to give you a raise. He has millions of people outside who are unemployed and so desperate they'll do your job cheaper than you. They'll do your job for starvation wages. It puts downward pressure on all labor wages and working conditions. And that's the thing. And this is exactly why our wages have been stagnant from the 70s. Well, corporate profits and cost of living and, productivity are skyrocketing. It's sky high. Our wages have been stagnant. That means we lost a huge chunk of purchasing power in the 99%. That means we don't have the disposable income we need to buy production and survive. So we're forced into private debt to buy that production and survive. Or we need credit cards for milk and eggs and gas. And because private credit always dries up, this leads to booms, busts, and bailouts that only help the rich, and government has to move back into a huge deficit position anyway to help the rich. It's inhumane, inefficient. It's fascism. Government is working for the profits at a 1% at society's expense. Government can always buy up all unemployment with a federally guaranteed living wage job program for everyone who wants one and maximize our productive capacity. Raise everybody's standard of living without raising taxes, without making cuts. That's government's job, to provision the general welfare and the common defense thereof. And this is how it does it. And people need to understand. And when we're talking about capitalism, this is another big one we have to understand. Now, capitalism only exists in the private sector, and only to the extent that our socially owned government even allows. All right. The government owns the private sector completely with its ability to impose tax and be the monopoly issuer of the only tax credit, dollars. Plus, it has its regulatory authority as well. So government owns the private sector. Nobody even owns property in America. We all rent. We all pay tax, just like communist China. It's a fact. People want to say, oh, well, churches don't pay tax. Well, they don't pay tax, but they still don't really own their land. If the government needs that land, say for the military or say for the general welfare for whatever reason, they deem it absolutely necessary, then the government can use eminent domain and take that land. The fact is, government owns everything. Government is the supreme authority per the Constitution. Capitalism, again, it only exists in the private sector, and only to an extent our socially owned government allows. There is no free market. The only free market is the black market. That's the fact. Even the dollars in your pocket belong to the government, and they're subject to recall, taxation at any time per the Constitution. So that's the whole thing, and we're all dependent on government, because only government can make dollars using the power of Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. So only government government taxation creates unemployment, and only government spending can satisfy that with paid employment. All right, so we are all dependent. All jobs are dependent on government spending regardless, either way, ultimately. And that, people have to understand that the job of a socially owned government is to work for the public purpose and let the individual make what they can from the balanced economy that ensues. That's the only way it works, When you do it the other way and your socially owned government works for the private profits of the individual and forces society to make do with the scraps, then you get what we got right now, this neoliberal era where we privatize the public space and we deregulate everything. We starve the economy of public spending to force us all into private credit just to consume production and survive. Because private credit always dries up, it leads to booms, busts, and bailouts that only help the rich, and government has to move back into a big deficit position anyway to help the rich. All right, it's completely illogical and inhumane and fascist. Instead, our government needs to maximize our productive capacity in a green, sustainable way that allows every single person to derive good benefit from our economy and from the society. That's what the general welfare is. All right, if you're targeting millions of people to be unemployed, if you're making sure millions of people throughout America are poor and destitute and in pain, dying of treatable illnesses, preventable illnesses, homeless, even though we got tons of houses available, starving, even though we got tons of food, not well educated, even though we got, the capacity for top-notch education. You see all these problems in society happen with this neoliberal era. When I say neoliberalism in the neoliberal era, I'm talking about we had the New Deal era, and that was based on the full employment policies under Roosevelt. And then in the 70s, the neoliberal era, both parties teamed up to kill the full employment policies of the New Deal and usher in the neoliberal era. And this is where we privatize the public space and deregulate everything. One-time public services that were free are now for profit, and they're inadequate, and they're not provided to all. That's what it is. And then we starve the economy of public spending and force everyone into private debt. So that's what we mean. And I'm going to go through each of the ways that we see how we do that throughout our economy and the negatives that come from that. We look at, when we privatize healthcare, first of all, this used to be a public service that was free, and it was an essential public service. Again, you need healthy populations to be a productive nation and produce all of the real resources that you will need. So, when we make for-profit healthcare, now you get this inefficient system where profit is the main objective and not healthcare itself and not the people, not society itself. It's profit. So you get a lot of drugs that don't even help people. They're specifically designed to make profit for the 1%. You get tons of kids being put on Ritalin, Adderall. You get tons of people all across America on antidepressants that don't help or more toxic. We get all these drugs. You watch the TV and you'll see, lawyer after lawyer advertising different, lawsuits against different drug manufacturers because they put profit over people in society, and our government allows them. Our government, instead of providing the public service that it's supposed to, instead of hiring doctors and healthcare workers to administer healthcare to people for free because it can, it's allowing the 1% to make healthcare for profit. And now you don't get people, everybody in society doesn't get top-notch healthcare as a result. Many people, get their health care through the ER. And so they end up suffering and dying of treatable illnesses, preventable illnesses, simply for a lack of cash. They end up spreading more disease throughout society. They end up spreading more violence throughout society because when you're in pain all the time and you're sick, you're not going to be a nice person. People snap. People become dog eat dog. You become desensitized. And when you're hungry and starving, and when you beat a dog, think of it like this: when you beat a dog every day and you feed it gunpowder and beat it every day, that dog's going to be crazy. It's not the dog's fault. It's the systemic factors that dog was forced to live under. It's the same with society. When we inflict economic and police terror on society, when we cut the social safety net, when we drug our kids with for-profit drugs, when we treat our people like enemy combatants, and you know what I mean? And we can't be surprised when they respond as insurgents. It's just human nature. People want to survive. So, our government is radicalizing people. This is against this isn't how you get civil society. So it's not consistent with government's constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society. It's that simple. And again, you look at for-profit education versus public education. Under the New Deal, we had robust public education in America. We turned out some of the best minds in the world, scientists, engineers. We put a person on the moon. Okay, we went from the Great Depression to the world's #1 superpower by deficit spending into our society, to invest in our society, in our productive capacity. That's what all this is: education, healthcare, infrastructure. It's all our productive capacity, because the money part of the equation doesn't matter. That's always infinite for a federal government. All that matters is we have enough real resources available to buy with that money. So that means our government has to constantly invest and strengthen our productive capacity to make those real resources that our money will demand someday. And so that means we need top-notch healthcare for all, because we need healthy population to make those real resources. We need top-notch education for all, because we need smart population to make those real resources of tomorrow. All right. And if we're paying doctors to administer healthcare to people, if we're paying teachers to administer, to educate people, we don't need to charge the end user. These are essential public goods in their own right. They're very socially valuable. They're essential to the general welfare of society. You can't get civil society without these public goods. And so, why charge money? The government never needs money. It never needs profit or revenue. It makes all dollars at will by congressional decree from thin air. That's the whole point again. And so we got to keep on going over this and hammer this. This is neoliberalism. This is the neoliberal way to privatize the public space and deregulate everything, to starve the economy of public spending and force us all into private credit just to survive. And look what happens when we, let me stay with this for a minute. Yeah, you make for-profit education, and you end up getting things like Trump universities all over the place. You get all these kids, strapped with debt, going to these for-profit universities and getting meaningless, worthless degrees that they're not even, worth toilet paper, really. They're just made up degrees about made up, obsolete technologies in many cases. I see, I was watching a commercial for one of them the other day, and it said, what was it? I forget the name of the school, but we provide important jobs. And it was showing their guy fixing vending machines inside of the Burger King. So Walmart. And I'm like, really? You're going to go to college and get strapped with debt to fix vending machines at Walmart? And that sounds like a good idea. This is what happens when we privatize the public space. All right. And also, K through 12, government inflicts austerity and, cuts public spending for education. And so, kids don't have the education that they once had. And there's many other, they don't have the family unit that they once had, and that has to do with the Uberization of our economy, the neoliberal economy where we live. because now instead of one income being able to raise a family, both parents have to be out there working full time, and that leaves kids vulnerable to drugs and gangs, and still those parents still can't make it, and they still have to be on the black market and do other things, and so it increases crime as well. Addiction, mental health, suicides, all of these problems that come from putting profit over government's mandate to the general welfare of society. Hi, Jenna. Yeah, I know. We all are desensitized in a way. And that's what I was trying to tell my mom, and that's how it has to be. For Nazi Germany to bring all those Jews to the oven, the population has to be desensitized, and look the other way. That's the whole thing. And when we don't, and can you imagine being in Nazi Germany back then and trying to go against the grain? That would have been horrifying. And it's the same way today, and people don't see that. You could lose your social status just as easy and end up at the bottom and end up victim to police terror and die over a flower, okay, or die of a preventable, treatable illness, or die of exposure. You can be intentionally made poor. You could be one of them, part of that 5% unemployment buffer stock. We are one mistake away, one accident away from being destitute. That's what neoliberalism does. And that's why it radicalizes all of our society. It makes us lose our humanity. We become indifferent to human suffering. And that brings me to the next thing, that when we privatize the justice system, this is another, public service, our legal system and our police department, things like that. This is a public service all the way. And when we have for-profit prisons and, government inflicts austerity and doesn't fully fund police departments, they got to end up policing for profit just to stay operational. All right. We end up getting these for-profit drug wars, for-profit vice wars. We end up criminalizing nature and peaceful behavior. We get cops legally raping and robbing and killing people all over evil flowers in the name of corporate profits. That radicalizes our society. And it serves nobody. The government needs to fully, well, first of all, like I said, they'll have this policing for profit, and they could rape, rob, and kill. And the more I think about this, the story about the cops raping this girl in Newcastle for marijuana, the more it becomes clear on the main objective. This girl was medically raped by police for 5 hours looking for marijuana. I mean, she had vaginal tearing. It was horrible. They never found anything. And they knew she didn't have nothing after the first 20 minutes, after the first x-ray and an examination. Okay, but yet they kept doing it over and over and over again. They wanted the pressure to get information about other drug dealers that they thought she knew because she had a black boyfriend. So that means she knows drug dealers, and so they wanted to get the names of these other drug dealers so that they could use civil asset forfeiture laws, which allows them to go in and just simply seize bank accounts, take people's property, take your house without even charging people with a crime. All the drugs. Yeah, that girl that we had medically raped told us that he was, so that's all they need. It's literally legal. The Supreme Court allows cops to take your property, seize your bank account without even charging you with a crime. All right, this is what happens when we put profit before people, when we put profit before government's mandate to the general welfare. All these horrible things. You should never have profit in the prison system. All right, you want to incentivize, make prisoners commodity? I mean, come on, it makes no sense. It's asking for trouble. It's a recipe for disaster. Our legal system needs to be, about harm reduction, not prohibition. Laws should not create more problems than the actual thing that they're criminalizing. All right. You criminalize marijuana and you make this huge ass black market that plagues our communities with violence and disease and all these different things and police terror, all for a flower that is literally, is so many healing properties, and it can do so many different things, from biodegradable plastics to fuel to textiles to you name it, medicines. There is so many different uses, and government makes it illegal. It's a for-profit drug war. It has nothing to do with public safety. They make drugs illegal for profits, for corporate profits. Think of all the profits margins that marijuana would cut into, and big oil, big pharma, textiles. Just off the top of my head. I mean, so that's why there was this big propaganda push by William Randolph Hearst and Anslinger with the Justice Department. Hearst was a media mogul, and DuPont, big pharmaceutical guy. And they got together in the 20s and 30s with this huge propaganda push to, really make people associate drugs with minorities and immigrants. They called weed marijuana so that people would think of Mexicans. There was tons of stories about, black people getting all coked up and raping white women. This was on purpose. It was a propaganda thing. They wanted people to, associate, people of color and minorities with drugs so that they wouldn't mind giving up rights to, that would actually infringe on all of them. But they wouldn't mind because they see it as something that would only affect minorities in the bottom. That's how it works. It's horrible. It just radicalizes people for no reason. We need to legalize all vice for the general welfare of society, because the black market, it doesn't care about addiction. It doesn't care about society. That's our government's job. And the black market is purely about profit. It's a capitalist wet dream. To make drugs illicit, to force me onto the black market to play doctor and treat my pain, it doesn't help society in any way. It doesn't help me in any way. It only serves to help the private profits of the 1%. The prison industry, the low wage work industry, the con game, all these different things. It's all connected. It all goes into each other. You look at when we put profit to our military. Our military. This is another. How can you argue this? This is a public service. Your military. It should never be about profit. Our government never needs profit or even revenue to spend and operate. And when we work for the private profits instead of the general welfare, we get for-profit imperialism. All right, we spread more death and suffering worldwide with for-profit imperialism than any civilization in history ever. All right, this is sick. We shouldn't feel good about this stuff. Everybody needs to be outraged and sick to their stomach all day and talking about this all day amongst each other. Then this stuff will change. It's the only way. If everyone shuts up about it and thinks about happier times, nothing is going to change ever. That's the whole point. We get this for-profit imperialism. Now it isn't, the military industrial complex has to justify its own existence. And so what ends up happening is we end up funding and arming and training terrorist groups all over the world and proxy wars, and simply just to destabilize whole regions of the world. All right. And then when these regions of the world, burn up and they're just complete chaos, then, they can get the military industrial complex can get the public support that they need for another for-profit war. It's seriously that it's not real hard to figure out what they're doing. And this is fact. You look it up. We've done it's not a one-off. This is a pattern. We team up with right-wing fundamentalist groups, right-wing extremist groups all over the world in proxy wars against socialist governments, against communism, because democracy in the workplace is it's too scary. So that's the deal. And then we turn a blind eye to these groups that we team up with. We turn a blind eye to the human rights violations and to the drug violations, because most of these things are black operations. All right. And so we turn a blind eye and even help them sell these drugs to fund these operations off the books without congressional approval. That's how it works. When they're talking about the Pentagon missing $21 trillion or whatever, a lot of this money, that's exactly where it goes. It goes to these black projects that are off the books, and no one really is supposed to know about them. That people said, oh, they stole 21 trillion. I don't really even know too much about it. I just heard a little bit. But they said, the Pentagon stole $21 trillion. And I said, well, I don't know much, but I know they didn't steal $21 trillion. All right. The Pentagon can't steal 21 trillion. They can't make dollars. Only Congress can make dollars with a spending bill. And we know about it. It's public record. It's a public Congress. Our government's a public institution, and we socially own our government again. So that's the deal. When we engage in for-profit imperialism all over the world to make profits for the 1%, we end up doing it again. We radicalize people all over the world that want to kill Americans. People will, give up everything and go across the world, give up their life if it comes down to it, to kill Americans. So this is, again, counterproductive to civil society. So this is not consistent with government's mandate to the general welfare of society. I mean, what more can you say? It ain't that hard to understand. For-profit imperial, all the different ways. Look, and also look up to, this is well documented. Look up in South America, the Contras. Look up in Afghanistan if you don't believe me. We literally trained the Taliban. We funded and created the Taliban. We called people like Osama bin Laden, freedom fighters. This makes us the biggest terrorist state in the world. We are the biggest state sponsor of terrorists in the world by far. And I'm not proud of that. That actually is very hurtful to understand, but it's still a fact. So we have to say it. Talking about, I was watching the news the other day and they were talking about Russia. Oh, big bad Russia. And they were saying how us Americans, we have to understand and be careful on the internet and social media. It's so scary. And they were saying that person that you're exchanging information with, they may not even be American. Uh-oh. And I'm thinking these people they have no clue. We don't give a shit who they are or what their motives are. If they're giving us truth, that's all we want. We want the truth, period. And we know you're not concerned with that truth. If they were really concerned with our democracy being hacked, if they were really concerned with our democracy being eroded, they would be talking about the real things affecting our democracy. They'd be talking about the DNC fraud lawsuit, where the DNC openly admits they have a First Amendment right to rig the primary. That erodes democracy. They would be talking about the fact that Congress has a lower approval rating than herpes, literally. And they get reelected over 90% of the time. All right. That is an erosion. That shows we are a banana republic. Look at the exit polls. I mean, they're off by huge margins from the official vote tally, and these are metrics that are seen usually in the worst banana republics in the world. And it's in America. You look up where we're at on the democracy index, or on the happiness index in the world. We don't even come in the top 10. I mean, we fell so far behind. It's insane. We prop up our whole economy with our military. It's the engine of our economy, and it's so immoral. It doesn't have to be like that. This is just a political choice, and we, the people, allow it because we believe the right-wing neoliberal lies about money that were designed to keep us divided. So we allow this stuff, and that's why we all got to start talking and interjecting this simple truth and logic, MMT, wherever it's needed. That's the only way change will come. Again, we have to make people uncomfortable. Good, you should be uncomfortable. Think about a person burning a flag, and people they're so offended, and oh my God, yeah, blah, blah. Well, that's the whole point. That is the whole point. You should be offended, but not because a flag's burning, because our rights are burning, because our democracy is burning. All right, because people are suffering and dying for no reason. For simple, so that 1% of the population can make profit. MMT destroys the lies with simple logic and common sense, simple logic and scientific fact, and it unites all sides for the public purpose. That's why MMT is the revolutionary vehicle we've all been waiting for. That's why you get a Republican like economist Mike Norman, running for the Senate. And because he understands how our economy works, our operational reality, in reality, he's to the left of Bernie Sanders. He's to the left of anybody in the Democratic Party. I would vote for Republican Mike Norman over Bernie Sanders. I mean, that's a remarkable thing. Maybe not after he comes out with his job guarantee. We'll have to see. But I mean, that's a remarkable thing in and of itself. I mean, that attests to the remarkable power of MMT to unite all sides in solidarity for the public purpose, first and foremost, as mandated by our Constitution of the United States. People don't understand this. They don't get it. They think we have no power, and so we don't. When you think you have no power, we don't. That's the whole point. The ruling class don't want us to understand the government can make dollars at any time to satisfy their constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society, because then we would demand that they do that. We would not accept anything else. We would, there'd be millions of people in D.C. occupying Congress. It'd be complete gridlock. The whole city would be shut down. That's the thing. And that would spark massive scale civil disobedience all throughout America. We could force our socially owned government to satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society by balancing the economy with a federally guaranteed living wage job program for everyone who wants one. And then people aren't dependent on private credit to begin with. People weren't vulnerable to predatory lending to begin with. We're not the precarious class anymore. Anybody can go and have a future. They can go and get a living wage job and, learn new skills and become a good productive worker and go on to make a great career in the private sector. This is how we balance our economy in a green, sustainable way that allows every single person to derive good benefit from our economy and society. It's the only way our government can satisfy its constitutional mandate to the general welfare of society. Just think about this. We got our communities across America right now are crumbling. They're starved of human resources. They're starved of infrastructure resources. We got millions of people unemployed. This is work the private sector doesn't want to do. All right. People are getting poisoned from simply drinking water. All right. So this is work that needs done. It's essential for the general welfare. It's essential for civil society that this work gets done. And no one else will do it. The private sector don't want to do it. So it's up to government to do that work. And it got millions of people that want to do that work. So government needs to use its constitutional power and, create dollars from thin air to pay people to work and provision our society with real resources that we need to raise everybody's standard of living right now. We can meet everybody's base needs in the public sector for free. Again, if the government's paying doctors to administer health care, we don't need to charge the end user. A government don't need profit. If government's paying teachers to educate, we don't need to charge the end user. It's an essential public good in its own right. If government's paying people to, build green, sustainable infrastructure, we don't need to worry about for-profit energy. We don't need to worry about fossil fuels, any of that stuff. This is revolutionary in every single way. But yeah, I'm gonna keep jumping around here for a little. I got a little bit mixed up there when I was talking about for-profit imperialism and all the different things that go along with that. They were saying, don't trust it. It could not. The person you're talking to on social media, they may not be an American. And I was thinking, boy, they really don't. If it has nothing to do with them being American or not, they just don't want us to get the truth. Look how they treat an American hero like John Kiriakou. This is an American. He told us the truth. He's the only American to do time over our nation's torture program. And he did time for exposing that torture program. All right. So don't tell me, it's about Russians, because you don't care if it's Americans or whoever. You just don't want the people to understand truth. And we're on to you. Look how we see how you treat Edward Snowden, another American hero that exposed tons and tons of American evil, violations of the Geneva Convention, human rights violations. This proved that we've been destabilizing the Middle East, proved that we've been destabilizing Syria, proved, all these different things, our foreign policy is in shambles. Then you look at, well, that's all I'm going to say about the foreign policy for now. I think you guys get the picture on that one. The biggest one for me is unemployment and paid employment. That's where everything flows from, because true full employment is a democratic means of production. So you can increase any production you need for the general welfare of society. From true full employment, you have labor for single payer health care. You have labor for nationalized education. You have labor for green, sustainable energy. You have labor for child care and elderly care. You have all this labor, and all these things raise our standard of living in America for everyone. This is a great thing. I don't understand how anyone could be against this. I was sharing my review of the Fox News segment of Bernie Sanders and the federal job guarantee, and I shared it in a Trump group and libertarian groups and this and that, and I was arguing with these Trumpies and different people, and I mean, the things that they were saying, they kept contradicting themselves and saying all this, nonsense. And I kept on showing them they'd talk about free stuff, and I'll show them how it's not free stuff. And then they would go and say, "Oh, well, it's not government's job." And then I'd show them how it's government's job. And then they go, "Well, it's free stuff." So it was almost like they just weren't reading even my comments or even taking the time to even consider what I had to say. And so that could be discouraging and stuff, but we still have to do it, because I put a bunch of answers up there, and there was only 2 people or 3 people that gave me problems out of thousands of people on that site. So that means there's other people reading those comments that aren't commenting. And if they're not commenting, I'm guessing it's because they don't want their buddies, their fellow Trumpies, to see that they actually get what I'm saying and they understand what I'm saying. So they keep it to themselves, and that could start them on the path to truth. Republicans love their families too. Once they understand that, their taxes don't pay for other people's mistakes, their taxes don't pay for anything. Taxes are destroyed upon receipt. Once they understand that, they're less likely to oppose public purpose spending. Once they know that their taxes don't got to be raised to raise everybody's standard of living, they love their kids too. They want a good society too. They're less likely to oppose it. It's real simple. So yeah, that's about all. So that's all I got to say. I'll be back next week for another one. Actually, I may be back before then to have a quick session or two. I'll be looking for people to interview, and I'll be trying to use this Be Live and become more proficient and have some better technical skills to bring you guys a better quality message so that you guys can understand it better and you guys can start teaching it too. But please, I want to see other people start to do this too. I mean, it doesn't. You don't have to be a PhD. Who cares what other people think? I don't give a shit what anyone thinks about me. If they think, look at that poor piece of shit. Look at his house. Look at his couch. Look at that stuff. I don't care. Listen how he talks. Listen how uneducated he is. Some guy actually shared my video the other day, and he said, he liked it, but he was saying, even though this kid don't look smart, he said, listen to him. He knows what he's talking about. And I guess it was supposed to be a compliment, but I got kind of offended too, but I didn't care. Because he was kind of right. You know what I mean? The whole point, I'm not educated. I'm a high school dropout. This is just simple logic to stuff that I'm saying. It's counterintuitive, and it will cause you to have cognitive dissonance, when you figure out that you've been lied to your whole life. and that all this pain and suffering is just a political choice, not an operational necessity. Yeah, you're going to get some cognitive dissonance. And yeah, it's counterintuitive when you first start to learn it, because how you think of your personal budget, how you think of your business's budget has nothing to do with the budget of a federal government that's monetarily sovereign like ours and makes its own money. It's a completely different ball game. But because it's just simple logic, anybody can overcome any cognitive dissonance that's involved with learning by simply diving into the material. When I first started reading Ellis Winningham, it was like a different language. I would have to read paragraphs 10 times, watch videos over and over and over, rewind them, take notes, think about these ideas, run them through my head. Play it out. The more we engage, the more we talk about it, the better our message becomes, the easier we can, paint a picture to, make people understand what it is we're actually talking about. The more proficient we get at being a messenger, so that's the whole point. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Peace out. Oh, before, is there any comments? Anybody? I don't know how to see all the comments. I can only see one at a time. Oh, yeah. What's up, Charles? And my mentee. I'll put up his thing. Yeah. Thanks, brother. Thanks, Carmen. Cool. All right. Well, take it easy.